Hi, and I am once again bringing you information about crypto. Not talking about short term trading though, right now in this video, but I am going to talk to you about something related to trading and investing in a couple of specific cryptos. And the story goes like this. Okay. Some analyst, doesn't really matter who, somebody, you can find it online if you want, recently published some idea that if you hold 10,000 XRP, you could possibly become a millionaire if XRP goes to $100. Well, okay, that's kind of obvious. Do the math. 10,000 times 100 is a million. Thanks. Didn't really need to have the opinion of a professional financial analyst to know that. That's like saying, hey, if you hold a million of a thing that costs a buck, you might be a millionaire. No, if you have a million of a thing that costs a buck, you're a millionaire, at least on paper. But the point is, right, it's a kind of silly notion to spread FUD and FOMO and silly nonsense like that, and that's in the FOMO variety, to tell people, hey, if you buy this coin that's worth 53 cents and it gets to $100, you'll be a millionaire. Like, that is such hopium, which we've heard in the crypto space about XRP since practically its invention and its first release on and its trades on markets, that it's kind of nonsensical. Okay, I'm not saying XRP can never get to $100, but think about what that would mean. Okay, for XRP to get to $100, while it's currently listed at 53 cents or something, so say it's 50 cents, okay, and that would mean that to get to $100, it would need to multiply roughly 200 times in value. 200 times in value on an asset that's currently worth, with a market cap that's worth around $30 billion, would mean 200 times 30 billion. 200 times 30 billion equals $6 trillion. $6 trillion is roughly, more than 4 times the price of Bitcoin's current market cap, which is like 1.4 trillion. So if the market continues to operate the way that it tends to, and the proportion of the value of XRP versus Bitcoin stays anywhere close to what it is even now, that would mean that Bitcoin's market cap would have to get to, if it's 1.4 trillion now, what's 200 times 1.4 trillion? That's like 200 trillion and 800 billion, something like that, dollars, right? So 200 trillion, 800 billion dollars would have to be the market cap of Bitcoin, roughly, before XRP would be worth $100. Now, of course, we know, obviously, altcoins can have insane growth spurts. And as I was saying today earlier, like with Litecoin, it's much more feasible that Litecoin would go from $60 to whatever, $1,000, okay? For example, I didn't give a number, but just for example. So having like a 12x multiple or whatever, 15x multiple, then it would be for a Bitcoin to 12 or 15x in the next, few years, right? Could happen with Bitcoin. We could easily see that happen, but it's more feasible just based on the amount of returns we've already seen on Bitcoin and the speed at which those returns continue to grow. They are growing. They're not accelerating. So, it's not that there's diminishing returns to zero on Bitcoin, at least not yet. But it's certainly fair to say that the initial acceleration of the initial 4 to 8 years on Bitcoin is no longer in effect because it started at zero. Right, so it went to $1,000. That's a lot of percentage gains, but it has reached dizzying heights of around 12 billion% returns already. When it hit the all-time highs this year, and really close to that when it hit near the all-time highs even previously, and as far back as 2021. So what that tells you is that the rate of return on Bitcoin, yeah, sure, it's diminishing a little bit, but still, even if it were to grow only 100 times, that would mean that Bitcoin would have to be 100 trillion and 400 billion dollars of market cap before XRP would 200x to get to that $100 mark. Now, the other thing is that XRP really has one basic use case, and it's not really a retail use case. I mean, yeah, sure, it kind of is, because users will, in theory, be able to do transactions through banks faster and cheaper and whatever. But the actual end user, like a real retail user, customer of a bank or whatever, that actually wants to use XRP, isn't really going to be using XRP themselves. The bank will be using it. Now, does that mean that XRP holders can't use it to do transactions? No, of course, XRP holders can use it to do transactions themselves, but the purpose of XRP is to serve as liquidity between banks in order to enable transactions to be faster, cheaper, etc. Even though banks are not, for the most part, or at all, going to pass off those savings to the average end user, right? We know they're going to keep charging those high fees as much as they can, and as long as they can, to users. So if you're paying $25 for a wire transaction that takes you 3 days now, or even a day, they're still going to charge you the $25, even if it only takes them a fraction of a second for that transaction to go through with XRP. What they're going to say is, well, it's a feature. Now we've sped up your transaction. So, in fact, we might even charge you more for it. We might charge you $30, when in fact, the actual transaction with XRP will cost them a fraction of a penny, right? But, they're going to see it as a value add, and therefore, they're actually going to charge people more money for the privilege of sending money via XRP. Most likely. Could it be that some people will be like, well, I'm fed up with this. I'm not going to keep increasing how much I'm paying for these wire transactions through banks. I'll just go somewhere else, get a different bank, use a traditional wire system, even if it's slower, or, figure out how to do crypto transactions on my own. The answer is yes, of course, that is an option. That is an option that might happen, right? But is it the most probable option? Well, time will tell, right? Only time will tell. We'll see what actual users decide, but there really isn't much of a use case for XRP aside from that. Now, I know there are some, okay, but the primary purpose of XRP is to be that liquidity between the banks to enable those kind of transactions. So, is it possible that XRP has a $100 value per coin if the only real customers of it are banks? I'm not talking about traders and investors holding it. I'm talking about customers, like who are actually using it. The customers will be the banks using that liquidity. Does the bank care if a coin costs $100? No, obviously. It's not a lot of money to them. It's negligible. And how many will they have? Well, it depends. How much do they need? But will banks see a value, in basically hoarding a huge stash of XRP that has hundreds of dollars or $100 or more in value, when you could just as easily do the same transaction with the same token, because there's plenty of liquidity to go around for all the banks in terms of XRP tokens for those banks, even at a cheap price. Arguably, it makes more sense if the token costs more, because then, as long as they can use a reduced number of transactions, a smaller fraction of a coin, as the price goes up, the amount they need to use of XRP would go down, essentially. So arguably, yes, it would help banks if the XRP token has a higher price, but realistically, we're talking about, again, a $6 trillion asset, right? Just for it to be worth $100 a coin. And that's just to provide liquidity for a transaction. When there are already, millions of other tokens that banks could use to do something similar. And I know the whole regulatory process is very complicated, and XRP, has invested a lot of time, or Ripple has invested a lot of time to get XRP to get approved and this and that, and they're still dealing with, fines, and they're still dealing with, regulatory issues. But these are all matters that, any other coin that has a serious use case beyond just the bank, or has a serious market demand beyond just this one particular use case, could, in theory, do. Now, I'm not saying that those would be better options than XRP for the specific purpose that we're talking about, because, again, XRP was really developed for that purpose. But I'm just saying, just because you have a great coin with a singular purpose does not guarantee that purpose will be met by every, be gladly used by every bank that could possibly use it. Some may choose other options. I doubt they'll stay on Swift forever if Swift isn't going to, adopt XRP as its liquidity system and all that. So, yes, they might have great relations with Swift after using it for decades, but it doesn't mean that everyone and every bank is going to use XRP to do their financial transactions between bank accounts. It's very probable that we'll see at least one other cryptocurrency, being used as an alternative to a liquidity provider system, basically greasing the wheel to enable transfers between banks in the methods that they need to do it. So that's my thoughts about that. Love to know what you guys think. Do you think XRP is going to hit $100, even in the next 4 or 10 years? Do you think it's realistic, or do you think it's more realistic that, we might see it never really go over $10 or $20 or $50, and then it might just, it could still grow to be a significant asset, but it doesn't need to be hundreds of dollars per token in order to satisfy the existing market of banks now and even in 10 years, especially when you consider the number of banks that are failing and the number of banks that are disappearing, and the fact that even JP Morgan, which tried to make its JP Morgan coin a thing, hasn't succeeded yet with that, and may never, because who wants to use their token? It was created initially to provide quicker transactions between them and certain clients, but it was intended, ideally, to become popular with other banks too. And a lot of other banks said, well, why would we use your token when we can use some other token or coin or crypto, or we could just use, XRP, which already exists. And so there's a lot of discussion about whether or not XRP will be the main player, or they'll have a serious alternative competitor from JP Morgan or some other big bank that might come along and try to make something similar. And all in all, these are questions that have yet to be answered for the XRP community. And again, even for Bitcoin community, like, if XRP really grows to $100, does that really mean that Bitcoin is going to see $100 trillion asset? Well, or two or more. It's certainly feasible that Bitcoin could see $100 trillion market cap and more, right? Because could the price go up 100x from where it is? Well, 10x from 60K is, $600K. Another 10x from that is $6 million. So a $6 million coin is certainly feasible. which I know sounds crazy, but when you think about how few coins there are, and if it becomes increasingly adopted and used to pay people's salaries and to buy, basic goods, and you do all the things that people do with fiat currency, once fiat begins to crumble even more than it already has, then in theory, sure, Bitcoin could go up to millions of dollars, especially if fiat's value and purchasing power just keeps falling. But keep in mind, if fiat's value keeps falling, $6 million 5 years from now is not what $6 million is today, obviously, or even 10 years from now. It's going to be a lot less than it is today. It's going to be, in 5 years, if the rate of depreciation or rate of purchasing power keeps continuing the way it's gone the last 5 years, then it's going to be cut in half again in another 5 years, and another 10 years, another half. So it's basically going to be cut 75% in the next 10 years, which means a $6 million coin would be effectively what a $1.25 million coin is now. All right, bear that in mind. So $6 million in 10 years really isn't going to be $6 million if you think of it in today's money. It'll still probably be relatively a lot for most people, but it won't be the kind of wealth that puts you in a completely different status if you have, a few or more of these coins. Yes, it'll make you technically a millionaire if you have a coin that's worth more than $1 million. But $1.5 million today isn't a huge number by a lot of standards. It's still more than most people have, but it's the price of a house in many places, like a regular 2 or 3 bedroom house in many markets where people work and are not millionaires. Yes, their house might be worth $1 million, but they can't use that $1 million to pay for their bills, right? Unless they sell the house and cash it out, and then use that money, in which case, once they drop below that $1 million mark, they're not millionaires anymore. So that asset might be worth $1 million or more, but unless it's worth $20 million, unless you have accumulated $20 million or something in today's money, you probably don't have enough to just take it easy for the rest of your life and do nothing and pretty much wherever you want, right? I'm not saying do nothing. I'm not recommending that. I'm just saying, if the dream for a lot of people, unfortunately, the dream is to not be productive and sit their butts on the beach and drink Mai Tais all day, you need in today's money, probably $20 million to be able to do that, right? To live in a nice house, live in a beach paradise, and just take it easy for the rest of your life, not work and not worry about money. 20 million will probably do that for most people. It won't probably be enough to leave much for their kids. It'll leave something, enough for them to be comfortable and be able to be productive and generate their own wealth. But it isn't massive generational, $1 billion wealth or even hundreds of $1 million wealth. There's nothing like that. Again, 20 million is a whole lot nicer than nothing, or even $1 million or 5 million. But you get what I'm saying, right? Anything under 20 in today's money doesn't make you really rich, and rich enough to just do whatever the heck you want for the rest of your life. And in 10 years, 20 million is going to be worth $5 million today, right? At the rate we're going, which means if you got 20 now, you got to, double it every 5 years in order to maintain the value of your 20 million today. Can it be that Bitcoin will help people do that? Yeah, it's entirely possible, but the time will tell. Again, like I said, it's not about trying to get rich quick overnight when you're talking about cryptocurrencies and whether it's Bitcoin or XRP or anything else. For investors, as the old saying goes, it's not about timing the market, it's about time in the market. And that's very true if you're a long-term investor. But there are, of course, opportunities when prices drop significantly and give you a massive opportunity to buy. And in that case, timing the market is kind of a no-brainer, because when you see a massive drop, typically what happens is, prices bounce back. Even if they don't go shooting right back up to where they were right before the drop, they'll at least give you a significant bounce so that your buy at the low is good. But of course, most investors don't know when the low is actually the low. And so that's why the old wise advice is, DCA, just buy a consistent amount every regular period, no matter what, and just keep stacking no matter what. If you can afford it, do it. And we're talking about investors, so of course most people aren't investors, so it only applies to people who have money to invest. But you know, for people who do want to invest and who do have some money to invest, DCA is really the way to do it, right? Which is why if you have like a job at a tech company or something like that, they typically, you know, in some companies they'll give you stock options or whatever. In some other companies they'll invest some of your money in a 401k. What is a 401k? It's a retirement fund. You know, some other companies they'll buy, you know, they'll stack ETFs aside for you, which are basically, you know, these derivative funds, right? Electronically traded funds that are basically usually buying either indexes or they're buying groups or different assets, but a bunch of them, so that you have like a mini index in your portfolio. And that's how they basically do it, so that you're constantly buying the same amount every 2 weeks or month or however, whatever your pay period is at work. And that's really the way to do it if you're not going to be a trader, if you're just going to be an investor. But again, XRP to $100, you know, I wouldn't lose sleep over it. That doesn't mean I wouldn't trade XRP, and that doesn't mean I wouldn't hold any. But I certainly wouldn't expect 10,000 XRP today to make you a millionaire by next year or even 5 years from now. Honestly, I wouldn't. Maybe it'll happen. Maybe I'll be wrong. I'd love it if I was, because then yay. But I think realistically, we've got a ways to go before we're going to see XRP do that. It might be in 10 years, but in 5 years, I don't know. I'm not so sure about that. That's 200x in 5 years for XRP. Still, you know, seems a bit unrealistic for now. But that's going to be it for now. See you guys in the Alpha Trading live stream. Starts at 9 a.m. Eastern time. And that's it. Cheers. Happy trading.